Thank you for following my channel, for liking the videos, subscribing, and for commenting so that we get the big picture about abuse of dressage horses, both in training and when competing. So I thought it was important to provide a background of Charlotte Dujardin's story in her own words. And I've read this from the point of view that this retrospective account, so before the abuse scandal broke, and this was published in 2018, so 6 years ago. But I wanted to get to know more about Charlotte, the person, in terms of what potentially or what is underpinning the abuse video. I was also interested in how she got the ride on the Allegro. So let's make a start. The book opens with her statement. People often ask me if dressage horses dance by themselves. Are you just sitting there steering? They say. Because I've watched you and I can't see how you're doing it. It's a question I love because if it doesn't look like I'm doing anything, then I'm doing something right. Dressage is all about harmony. Having a relationship with your horse where it has confidence in you so that everything you do together looks effortless and easy, like it's all happening by magic. And I'll skip to, I always wanted to win, always. I was a terrible loser. And if I made mistakes, Mum would be frustrated. I would be frustrated. And then I'd get annoyed and moan like mad. And this is her as a small child. Sorry, I forget what age she says, but she started off with show ponies. And this is a disturbing statement because it suggests that she witnessed abuse of horses in training. And this is about a pony, a show pony called Diana. Diana was really cool, but incredibly sharp. Well, why would you buy an incredibly sharp pony for your child? My mum had to lunge her for hours before I could get on her to try and make her as tired as possible. And even then, she'd still get quite goey if we were at a show with a lot of atmosphere. So here you have a parent wanting the child to win and acquiring a not entirely suitable child's pony. And she's wanted to make the pony tired so that she would be easier for her child to ride. But in training terms, I mean, first of all, you would not lunge a horse, a fairly fit horse, for more than 15 minutes. And I'm assuming this pony was doing more than walking, so perhaps trotting, cantering. And the end result of that could be that the pony gets fitter, so becomes more challenging to ride. So I think the message that Charlotte would have got here was that the pony had to do what was required and whatever it takes. But the reality is there was a mismatch between the pony and the child. And I'm not denying that Charlotte was a capable rider at this point, but she would have got the message that perhaps the pony didn't matter. It was a vehicle for winning. And I should point out that her mother was a competing show jumper, so there was extensive experience of owning and training horses before this. And she goes on to say, or another insight, often they'd been plonked on at the last minute. Their grooms or their mothers or professional show pony producers had been the ones riding and training their ponies day in, day out. So, yes, I'd known about this practice, but the fact that it's included in this autobiography tells me that she doesn't have a problem with it. I never accepted defeat. It was the same if I had a problem with my riding. I'd be out in the school until I'd fixed it. But if it didn't happen soon for her sister, she would get off, cry, and throw her horse in the field. So it doesn't say whether or not her mother approved of this behaviour from the child. Then I'd get it in from the field, tack it up and sort it out. So what is sort it out? What has this child learned about training horses that has given her the confidence, competence, if you could call it that? How did she sort it out? What training had she received? And why was she doing this on her own? Maybe the mother was there. But as a mother, would you be, how accepting of this would you be that your child, who would know at that age very little about ethical training, why is this somehow the norm? Where was her mother? Obviously, her sister hated her for it, especially if one of her ponies went better for me than it did for her. So some sibling rivalry here. And just to point out that her sister was older than her. We joke about it now, but we could be pretty horrible to each other. And my revenge would always be to go off, do something my sister couldn't, and make sure Mum was watching. Okay. Mum, come and see what I can do. So this to me seems a little abusive of sister as well. But again, she's very competitive, and she's also competitive against her sister and wants recognition from her mother. But the fact that she says, I'd be out in the school until I'd fixed it, not I would be looking at gaps in the training to see if there was a fix, or perhaps involve a trainer, a professional trainer for the fix. So she was riding fairly dangerous ponies for young children and doing something to alter that behaviour. And I can't see what part her mother played in this role, because it's not clear whether she was there or not. It sounds like not. I had a natural feel, a sense of what I needed to do when I got on a horse. I think now it must be similar to the way artists work. They have an idea in their mind of what they want to draw, then they get a piece of paper and do it. It's weird, but riding is like that for me. Yeah, so as an athlete, you do have goals, but I'm questioning here whether she was using ethical training methods at an early age. I'm not sensing that she did, because children are not usually very knowledgeable about training their ponies. But to be fair, I have seen a lot of children ride who praise their ponies. They have very good partnerships, but I don't think that praising this pony was a thing here. What I learned is that a horse is like a puzzle with different strengths and weaknesses. Yes. And it's your job to put the pieces together and work out how to get the best out of them. Well, yes. At Debbie's, one of the people training her, so a riding instructor, riding coach, I was always put on the most awkward ponies in the yard. So what do you do with awkward ponies, I wonder? Because in her abuse videos, I saw that she sensed that horse was being awkward and wouldn't do what she wanted it to do. So she had to beat it relentlessly. But the more difficult a pony was, the more I wanted to get on it anyway. There were too many to remember. Okay, so she has this extensive experience of riding difficult ponies, riding ponies that potentially were in pain and didn't understand what the rider wanted, or it was painful for them to comply. And I have seen this in the past, and I have had to advise on it where owners are perhaps not so knowledgeable, but I have to remind them that much as the child wants to ride a pony that is potentially difficult, that may be in pain, the parents need to know that that child is in grave danger. And normally when children are in grave danger, their parents remove them from grave danger. So I have to point out, this pony could hurt your child. You will need a veterinarian to rule out or address pain issues. It needs to be investigated clinically. But don't put your child on this pony until you've consulted the veterinarian, or your child could be seriously injured. Punishing them is not the answer. And with Cot, I knew that the key was staying as calm as possible whenever I rode him. So you've got a different viewpoint here. So this tells me that when she's up against a horse that will fight back, or later on, as she describes, is quite hot, she has to be more of a passive rider. So this is something different to sorting it out, as she said earlier. Being told what you're doing wrong is the only way you're ever going to improve. Van Dyke was where I met my best friend. There was a big improvement in my homework after I got to know her. So she's talking about being at school, mainly because she was the one doing her homework. So I'm seeing some cheating here, the willingness to cheat. And yeah, perhaps she did spend a lot of time with her ponies so that her schoolwork was neglected. But she's written here in so many words that she was willing to cheat when it came to her doing her homework. Why would you put that in your autobiography? If she did my homework, she could come over to our house and ride with me. Okay, so you've got another partner in crime here. So one child likes to ride ponies and she's willing to do the other child's homework for a reward. And my teachers would be delighted. Oh, Charlotte, you've really improved on this. And I'd be sitting there looking blank. Okay. So I'm sensing here that, yes, the job of homework had to be done. And rather than not do it, she found a way to get round that. And the teachers were praising her for that, not knowing any better. He's one of the few people I can stand having around me before a show. So yes, I mean, I've been in that position. I do understand it. When you're competing, but the main thing is you want to maintain your focus. There's a lot to do, getting the horse ready, getting the tack on, warming up, etc. And you don't want anything to impact on that or influence that negatively. Talking about a pony, it seems funny now to think it was Rene who introduced us, because it was probably the only good thing he ever did. So she's talking about the introduction with a pony's owner. He may have been amazing to look at, but he was a pig to ride. So again, there's this acceptance that horses can be denigrated in writing, and that there's no recognition that these poorly behaved or poorly trained horses can be in pain. And that's the reason for them being awkward. He was awkward and lazy on the ground. He'd drag me everywhere. We got him as a 3-year-old, and when we sold him a couple of years later, there was not a single tear shed. So this was one pony that she couldn't coerce into doing what she wanted. So he had to go. I'd been used to riding in a double bridle from a young age. And talking about another rider, she'd grit her teeth and carry on riding and fighting until the bitter end. It was an attitude I learned a lot from. And she was, in fact, talking about Isabel Worth, the elite German rider, dressage. Isabel was ridiculously talented, and although her horse Gigolo perhaps wasn't as expressive in terms of the gait as Ankie van Grunsven's bonfire, she could always pull out the best in whatever she rode. So this presumably intrigued Charlotte at a young age. I always found watching her quite funny because if she made a mistake, she'd start muttering away to herself all around the arena. But when she did something well, she'd pat her horse and smile and look like she was having the most jolly time. Showmanship. So that she'd grit her teeth and carry on riding and fighting. So Charlotte saw it as some kind of fight until the bitter end. So presumably Charlotte would not have been watching Isabel training, but actually Isabel competing, and she saw it as a fight. And she learned a lot from that attitude. That you have to fight with horses, perhaps? I just happened to glance and see that she mentions back pain here from doing a job as a pot washer at a local pub for one night. So back pain in her teenage years. Which, from my research, is an indicator or a risk factor for developing back pain later in life. When we went to a show, she would drive the lorry, plait up, and make the ponies look pretty. And I'd get myself ready, get on, and ride. That was my part of the job. Then after we'd finished, Mum would untack the pony, wash it off, put it away, and drive home. I look back now and think that if I'd been the adult, I probably would have wanted my child to be more independent at a younger age, but Mum loved it, and it was what all the showing mums did. So, yes, I can see how teamwork is essential and efficient for competing, that each team member has their different roles, but what are you teaching a child when you allow them to just do the nice bits of the job while you yourself do the chores? Unfortunately, time wasn't improving things between Renee and me. I've still got the scar on my arm from when he towed me off one day. So he's bolted with her. We were just about to go to a show and I'd chalked all his socks so they were crystal white and he looked a picture. Then I went to lead him up the ramp of the horse box and he thought, no thanks, and shot off in full flat-out gallop up her trainer's drive. I wasn't going to let go because I'd got him all groomed and plaited and ready, but he tore my breeches, ripped my arm open, and then, just to add insult to injury, went straight for a ploughed field, and I was absolutely furious. Now, other people would read this scene as the pony, for some reason, not wanting to get on the lorry, not wanting to travel, or not wanting to be ridden when they'd got to the destination. But Charlotte, never the one to be defeated, has pursued this desperate pony, and she's very cross about having to do so. But she still went to the show and rode. I can't even remember how I did it, but I was pretty stressed, as you can imagine. Fernandez, like Rene, wasn't a horse Mum set out to buy. She knew what I liked, though, and when she saw him treating people like crash test dummies, she thought, that's the perfect horse for Charlotte. Concerning. When I go to buy a horse now, I'll always look in their eyes because it will often tell you a lot about their character. 90% of the time, if you see a kind eye, you've got a kind horse. Apart from sometimes bolting, that was Des all over. But I don't see any sign of either Charlotte, her mother, or her trainers, or certainly it's not stated here, that horses misbehave from the perspective of the rider when they are in pain. And the solution is not to keep riding them until they submit. It's to consult a veterinarian and investigate any pain signs. So she's acquired a horse that's difficult, that's young, and this was an expensive horse. £20,000. When we went round the back of the indoor school to see him, he was tiny, no more than 15.3 hands, so not much bigger than a pony. I think even Mum was taken aback. He'd looked big when he was ridden because he had such presence and the air of a real showman. He was also built well, with his neck set in such a way that he naturally looked very uphill. But up close, I really didn't think he was going to be big enough. Well, he's 3, so he's still growing, Mum said, I think trying to put a brave face on it. So you have a 3-year-old horse here that had acquired injury in the mouth from the bit and sores from where the girth and the bridle had gone. So then she said it was so nice to seeing him grow up and get stronger in front of my eyes, because it was obviously what he wanted, but at the same time, not being able to get on him straight away was pretty hard. So without the trainer's input, I'm pretty sure she would. So early 2004, I'd made it to advanced medium level, competing in young rider classes. Top hats and tailcoats were compulsory, and getting mine felt like the ultimate goal. And putting them on, I felt so proud, although I did think I had to then go out and deliver the goods. I didn't want to be all gear and no idea. So this is something else that's adding to her competitive personality trait, that it was important to show that you had the talent and competence to match the outfit. I don't think Jenny liked Whiz much. She used to call him that lazy brute, which really annoyed the trainer. But Rene was properly lazy, whereas Whiz would sometimes simply say, not today. I'm not really feeling it today. Well, again, the horse could be in pain, and these riders don't seem to be considering that. Then you'd have to say, oh, come on, Whizzy, try. And you could feel him sort of roll his eyes and say, "Oh, all right then." This doesn't sound very harmonious to me. He was such a gent and always did his best, whereas René was just a pain in the backside. So she likes the more submissive horse, and presumably she just lacked the training expertise to deal with a more challenging horse, or she just didn't consider that they could be in pain. In my experience, and this is especially true for new horses that are acquired, you don't know the true personality until their pain has been resolved, and they can transform. Much of the time when they're misbehaving, they are screaming psychologically at the rider to listen to them, to hear them. They're demonstrating that there's a problem. But unfortunately, there are riders who take that as a challenge, and it would appear to me from what Charlotte's written that she was one of them, that it's a challenge to conquer, overpower these difficult horses. So going on, she got the ride on a third horse, but he had one big issue. He wouldn't piaffe. And her trainer had been told this by an international dressage rider. The thing about piaffe is that it's a natural movement. A stallion will start jogging on the spot in front of a mare. Same with passage and flying changes. Horses naturally do them all the time when they're out in the field cantering around. But what's not natural is trying to get them to perform movements to order while they're wearing a saddle and bridle and have got a rider on their backs. And obviously, because you can't talk to a horse, obviously, the only way to communicate anything you want is through your legs, seat, and reins. I shouldn't really have thought that I could teach Luke to piaffe just like that. No, you shouldn't. But I did feel quite confident, and I never resist a challenge. So she told her trainer she wanted to have a go. And as you can imagine, she looked at me, the apprentice, in total disbelief and bet that she couldn't do it. But if somebody says I can't or won't be able to do something, it only makes me want to do it more. Anyway, within 2 weeks, I managed to get this horse piaffing. But she doesn't say how. I would have thought she would have made a note there about how she managed to do that. But with her history of coercing horses, I would not be confident that this was done ethically. I just wouldn't. Charlotte's been playing with a bit of piaffe, she said as I was going around the school. Why don't you show them, Charlotte? So I picked up my whip and touched him on the bum, and of course he bucked me clean off. So perhaps what works with one horse does not work with another. Do horses who are more of a submissive type get selected and considered trainable via fast fix methods that are not a fix at all? But here she's met her match, and this horse has a fear of the whip. So at this point, she's 20 and wanted to learn to drive. I had lessons with my brother, And as he was so into cars, he was much better at it than I was. So triggering her competitive nature. Because I'm the kind of person I am. I can't stand being bad at anything. And it especially annoyed me since Charles is younger than me. So she's a middle child and competing with her siblings, which she particularly dislikes, or when she finds that the younger sibling is better at her than something, even though she's 20 years of age here. And then the next part is when she goes on to meet Vallegro. So I will stop at this point and continue in the next video. I want to give you a chance to comment on what you've heard so far, because I'm seeing an abuser in the making here. It's concerning, but what's more concerning is that nobody's stopping her. Thank you for watching and contributing.